It's a biographical story, and it led us to think quite deeply about how you engage an audience in biography and not get trapped in that sort of cradle to grave episodic storytelling. And then obviously Rising Phoenix drew us into the world of disability, and we sort of fell in love with many of the stories and obviously the athletes that we met. And it became something of a passion that really changed the lens through which we saw the world.
Hello and welcome to the CineManiax podcast. I'm your host, Chris Reed, editor at Film Festival Today, lead critic at Hammer to Nail, and chair of the Department of Film and Moving Image at Stevenson University. On today's show, we're going to talk about our favorite films of the year, as well as what might have a chance to win some awards. Joining me on the show is Mae Abdulbaki, reviews editor and a senior critic with Screen Rant. She is a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic and a proud voting member of the Critics' Choice Association, the Alliance of Women Film Journalists, the Washington, D.C. Area Film Critics Association, and the Black Reel Awards, the last two of which I am also a member. It's great to have you here, Mae. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with you. What were your top 10 films of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got 10 in no particular order. Conclave, Exhibiting Forgiveness, Honora, The Substance, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, Wicked, Baby Girl, Small Things Like These, Ghostlight, and Hard Truths.
Well, that's quite an interesting list. Before I read out my list, which has, I think, only one film of overlap, can you tell me something special about one or two of those films and why you chose them?
Yeah, Hard Truths kind of took me by surprise. I watched it pretty late in the game, but it has a tremendous performance by Marianne Jean-Baptiste. And I think that the themes of the film really hit home for me, considering that thinking about my family personally and just everything that the film is trying to showcase. And it's just a really difficult role with a really hard to like woman who you end up really rooting for. And that really spoke to me. And Small Things Like These is one of those really quiet films where you don't really know where it's going, and then you do, but you're sort of waiting it out. And I think that it's just fantastic adaptation of the book that it's based on, and Cillian Murphy is excellent in it. And it's just one of those films that sticks with you long after you've seen it, and it kind of really gives you this feeling that there is good in the world.
Yeah, I really agree with you about the performance of Marianne Jean-Baptiste in Hard Truths, and also agree with everything you said about Small Things Like These, which we talked about a little bit on our last episode of this show, since I saw it at the Middleburg Film Festival, and that was the subject of our last show. So here's my top 10, and I should say that I usually make a top 10 of fiction or narrative films and a top 10 of documentary films. So what I've done here is I've taken 5 from each, not entirely randomly, but there could have been some other films on here, such as Small Things Like These. But here is my list for now. For fiction, I have these 5 films in alphabetical order: All We Imagine as Light, Conclave, that's our area of overlap, Memoir of a Snail, Night Bitch, and Sing Sing. Then the 5 I chose from my top 10 documentary list are Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, and we have an interview at the end of this podcast with one of the 2 co-directors of that film, Billy and Molly, An Otter Love Story, Dahomey, Every Little Thing, and She Looks Like Me. And so have you seen any of those films, Mae, that were not on your top 10 lists?
Well, I haven't seen Memoir of a Snail, but I really do want to see it. And like you said, these lists, they change with time. But I think the overlap that we do have, Conclave is perhaps my favorite of all the ones you mentioned.
Well, I'm going to just explain briefly why I like a couple of these. So I'm going to talk about Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, as an intro to that interview. But Billy and Molly, An Otter Love Story, is this absolutely beautiful film that everyone can watch right now on Disney Plus, because it's a National Geographic film, and it's set in the Shetland Islands of Scotland, the northernmost territory of the United Kingdom, and it follows a river otter that is rescued as a young pup. She is Molly, and the rescuer is Billy, and it's sort of this lovely love story, but a love story between a parent and a child. It's also a love story between Billy and his wife Susan, gorgeously photographed, I highly recommend it. The interview that I conducted at South by Southwest with the director and the producer remains the most read article at Film Festival today because I think a lot of people respond to this film. And then Memoir of a Snail is this amazing Australian stop-motion animation film that appears for much of its runtime to be wallowing in the depressive misery of the life of the main character, but then it really surprises you with a sweet ending where many of the threads are reconciled. And even when it's delving into some dark material, it's very quirky in its humor. It's a work, a labor of love. This is painstakingly crafted stop motion animation. I highly recommend it. So yeah, those would be my overall recommendations, and those two in particular. So do you have a sense, Mae? I mean, you're really plugged in over at Screen Rant. What films do you think have the best shot at awards this year?
I think Conclave and Anora have pretty great shots at winning. Surprisingly, Wicked has kind of risen in the ranks, but I'm also still not sure that it has a big opportunity to win Best Picture. I think Emilia Perez is one of those movies where it's hit or miss for a lot of people, so I'm not quite sure how far it'll go, but I still do think that it'll be nominated.
I should point out that one of the two critics group that we're both a member of, the Washington, D.C. Area Film Critics Association, chose Wicked as the best picture of the year. Personally, though I enjoyed the film and understand why people are responding to it, I was rooting for something else, but a lot of people like the film. So I think when you say its chances are rising, I believe you. And as surprising as that may seem, did you enjoy the film? Well, you did. It's in your top 10.
I did. I'm a big Wicked fan. I saw it twice on Broadway. So I had high expectations for the film going in, and it managed to actually meet them, which was very surprising. I have very high standards for something like this because it's so beloved and it's been around for many, many years. But they managed to really capture the essence of the film, and I think that the casting was great. I was not intending to say that Ariana Grande actually was good in this film, which was a surprise to me.
She was amazing. And of course, Cynthia Erivo was, mind-blowing. But, I mean, that's less surprising. But I really thought Ariana Grande was also terrific. What I'm curious about, because I've never seen the show, I know, shame, I've long wanted to. But the film is as long as the stage show, right? And yet the film is only part one. So how did that happen? I mean, you've seen the stage show twice. How did they manage to take in the same running time to only tell half the story?
I mean, they basically extended character beats that were already in the show and just made them longer. They added in a couple of things. Don't quote me on this, but I don't recall like Fiyero being the Prince of Oz. That's new. So they just added more stuff and engaged with the characters more than the stage show had the opportunity to do. And I think it worked out. I'm excited to see part 2 and see what they do with the second half because it does get a lot darker.
Yeah, well, I am too. I mean, I may not have wanted this to win the WAFCA award, but I definitely am rooting for the film's success. It's very moving, great performances, and I definitely want to see part 2. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see if it does continue to show legs and maybe win something. So I want to thank you for being on the show and for sharing your thoughts about your favorite films of the year, Mae. It's been great.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Next up, I'd like to share my recent interview with Peter Ettedgui, one of the co-directors of a film that was in my top 10, Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story. The documentary chronicles the highs and lows of actor Christopher Reeve's life, including both before and after the tragic 1995 horse riding accident that paralyzed him from the neck down. It includes poignant interviews with Reeve's 3 children and ample footage from his movies. Especially moving are the moments with wife Dana, who also died in 2006, leaving their son Will orphaned. Expect tears, but also joy. It's quite the cinematic feat. Peter, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to CineManiax. Before I ask about how you came to make this movie, I want to start by asking you about the recurring image within the film of the twisted body of Christopher Reeve as Superman turning in the cosmos, surrounded by tendrils of kryptonite. When and how did you land on that as a visual motif?
Okay, so I mean, I'm going to backtrack slightly to our first 2 films that Ian and I made together, McQueen and Rising Phoenix, because for both of those films, we worked very hard to kind of get a visual leitmotif that would run from the main titles interstitially through the film, almost like connective tissue that sort of like brings together the various visual elements of the story. Because when you're making a documentary, you're often dealing with quite literal tools, whether it's archive or interview. And we always seek to try and find something that works on a kind of a metaphorical and more visual level that takes you into a space where you can almost reflect as well on what you're seeing in the archive and hearing in the interviews. So that's been that's been something that we have striven to do in all our films. And with this one, when we started thinking about the film, we were very interested in the idea of a statue, because there's something sort of like obviously heroic, but also the fact that a body is seized in stone. It's a form of entrapment. And I think that's quite interesting for Christopher in both modes of the story. In other words, when he's Superman, he's kind of like trapped by the part almost. And when he is, after his accident, he's trapped in his body, can't move at all. So we thought a lot about that image. And then in terms of the background to the image, like that sort of like cosmos that you see in various states behind it, we were very interested in something that Christopher said very early on. It was almost like a call to arms to science and medicine to say, look, we've taken man to the moon, we've conquered outer space. Isn't it time that we sort of like conquered inner space and tried to find ways of healing the kind of fracture that he had? So we liked that idea of outer space and inner space a lot. And we felt that there were certain rhymes when we started looking at imagery of outer space and imagery, macroscopic imagery of what goes on inside the spine. We kind of found there were some really interesting correspondences. So with our amazing computer graphics team that we work with at Passion Pictures, we started experimenting with that. And the idea that planet can turn into two splitting stem cells, for example. So that was really the thinking behind it. But as I say, it all comes from this place of wanting to create a powerful metaphor that you can thread through the film and serves a variety of purposes, both thematic, but also in terms of the kind of documentary medium as well.
Well, it's certainly a very powerful image, and it's a very powerful film. I should have led by telling you how much I loved your movie. I saw it for the first time at DC Docs, where Alexandra Reeve was present. I just rewatched it last week, and it was equally as powerful.
Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah. So you mentioned your previous films. The two of you, you and Ian, first collaborated on, I believe, McQueen, which is
right.
2018 documentary about fashion icon Alexander McQueen. And then you worked on Rising Phoenix, which is a 2020 documentary about the Paralympic movement. So you did fashion and then you did disability. That explains partly how you might have had an interest in this subject. But could you tell me how you came to be the filmmakers to make this sort of definitive movie about the late Christopher Reeve?
There's always an element of kismet about these things. And when we were making Rising Phoenix, I was very struck going through a bunch of archive one day with our amazing editor, Otto Burnham, who also worked on Superman. There was this imagery archive of Christopher Reeve at emceeing the opening ceremony of the Atlanta Paralympic Games, an image that really stuck in my mind. We weren't able to use that archive in the film, even though looking back, we should have done. Would have been a nice tie-up. But definitely stuck in my mind. And we were approached through an archive producer who had reached out to Matthew Reeve, and Daniel Kilroy, this archive producer, had sort of was trying to find out whether the family had archives that they might be willing to have used in a film about their father, because incredibly there hadn't been a documentary made about him. Maybe not so incredibly because the kids had always slightly resisted. They had been approached for both fiction and non-fiction versions of their father's life, and they'd always sort of like backed off from that. I think they grew up with a lot of attention around them, being the children of Christopher Reeve, and an enormous amount of attention on their father. And after he passed away, I think there was a conscious effort to sort of try and remake their lives and find their own paths, as they say at the end of the film. So, they hadn't want to kind of go back to the past until now, really, with 20th anniversary of his death looming. They kind of felt now was the right time. And so, Daniel's approach was serendipitous. And they immediately said, well, we might be willing to do this, but who would direct it? And then we came into the picture at that point. The first thing to say is that they knew McQueen, they came to know Rising Phoenix, they loved them both. And so from the beginning, there was an element of trust between us. When we started talking, they knew that in spite of appearances to the contrary, we were not going to be complete muppets and mess their dad's legacy up. So that's really how it came about. For us, it was a no-brainer. I mean, I kind of feel, you alluded to the two films that we made, and yes, McQueen is obviously set in the world of fashion, but it's a biographical story, and it led us to think quite deeply about how you engage an audience in biography and not get trapped in that sort of cradle to grave episodic storytelling. And then obviously Rising Phoenix drew us into the world of disability, and we sort of fell in love with many of the stories and obviously the athletes that we met, and it became something of a passion that really changed the lens through which we saw the world. So coming back to it for this film was a no-brainer for us, and this is a story that I grew up with, so it was truly a privilege to get to direct a film about Christopher.
It can't have been easy for many of the people involved to talk about Reeve. We see Gay Exton, the mother of his first two children, break down, and Reeve's youngest son, Will, has quite a moment when discussing his late mother's diary entries. Again, rewatching the film, I found that incredibly powerful. How did you and Ian yourselves handle the emotional roller coaster of such scenes?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that it's absolutely essential to build a degree of trust, and I would almost say friendship and confidence with your subjects, so that when you come to do the interview, it's a safe space and there is not a problem in revealing how you truly feel about something. We always encourage that anyway, but we also make sure that whether it's Will or Gay, or in fact anyone on the film, that they all feel that it's a safe place and they can confide in us and in the audience. And so, and also obviously there's a lot of loss in this story. I think there's also, I hope, an element of uplift, but the loss is pervasive and it stays with you. And for Gay, it was all too clear from us from the first time we actually met her, well before the interview, that there was still a deep love that she had for Christopher. And with Will, who seems like the most confident, eloquent young man, it became clear that, he was still very much working on the process of grieving. It's something that has accompanied him through his life. And, because he lost not only his father, but his mother and his grandparents in a very condensed period of time. So we knew that there was going to be a lot of emotion in the room. We're careful about it. With Gay, you see the first few seconds when she breaks down, and we cut camera at that point. With Will, he was fearless about it. There was no problem. No, he would have hated us to cut. And I love the fact that they were so able to feel so comfortable and so candid in the interviews. And there were a lot of tears, not just on that side of the camera, but also on our side of the camera.
Yeah. So I think I have time for just one more question. I want to give a shout out to your composer, Ilan Ashkari, who's done such an amazing job here.
Amazing.
And he has an incredible variety of movies before this, including Layer Cake, Kick-Ass of all films, Austenland, Alan Partridge, The White Crow, etc. What instructions did you give him? I find the score extremely evocative in the best possible way.
We worked with Ilan on a television series called Kingdom of Dreams a couple of years ago, and we knew both how versatile he is, but also how able he is with melody. And we felt that the score needed to have a classical component, not least of all because it has to, in some respect, dovetail with John Williams' amazing Superman score. So, when we started talking about the film, we talked a lot about Christopher's character and his home life and the archive in which we see him play the piano. And Ilan's first attempt was really to sort of organize a score, a melody around the piano. But we felt that wasn't quite strong enough. And actually the film could take something, because it's quite epic in its emotional scale, it could take something that was more orchestral and that counterpointed Williams kind of more obviously, and used French horn, which is a heroic instrument in the orchestra, and the harp, which is the most fragile instrument, and to us sort of represented the spinal column almost. So, and strings, and it was just, once he felt encouraged by us to go that route, he really sort of he came up almost immediately with that theme that we hear throughout the film. I mean, there's several different themes and motifs in the film, but that central theme, which is Christopher's theme, is he came up with, and he built with sampled instruments, he built a really powerful, and didn't change after that. I mean, we just all fell in love with it.
Well, it's a really powerful score for a really powerful film. I want to thank you so much for talking to me, Peter. It's an honor.
A pleasure. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for the questions.
Superman, the Christopher Reeve Story, is such a beautiful film, and I'm grateful to Peter Ettedgui for the conversation. You can read the transcript of the interview at Film Festival today. If you're curious about any of the films that we discussed on this show, be sure to check them out in theaters or via your streamers. You can read my film reviews at Film Festival Today and Hammer to Nail by checking out Chris Reed Film on Instagram. For the CineManiax podcast, I'm your host, Chris Reed. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you at the movies.
Thanks for listening to Dragon Podcasts. Connect with us at podbean.com/dragonpodcasts.